Hi, welcome to another live Google Hangout. And today we have Viktor Persson from Sweden discussing a very interesting topic. Hi, Viktor.
Hello.
So today's topic is the right to life is a right to money. And today we will be essentially taking on this aspect of how our living rights are meant to be protected by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But why is this not being generally applied? And what can we look at in terms of the legal aspect of the living income guarantee? So, Viktor, what do you have to say about this topic?
Yeah, well, so I can begin with saying that recently I went through a course in international law at my university, and we went through all the conventions. You know, there are thousands of conventions. And so we also went through this Declaration of Human Rights by the UN. And one point that I noticed was like consistent, regardless of what convention we were talking about, was that it exists on a reality level, so to speak. Meaning, you could read it in the law. I mean, you saw the words there, like cool words, like everybody has the right to life, for example. But when I asked the teacher, so, I mean, what if I go to the court, let's say, and I say, okay, I don't have a job. So, I mean, look here in this convention, it says I should have a job, you know, I have the right to work. Is this court then going to give me a job? And the teacher said, like, no, it doesn't work like that way. So within that, I started to realize that, I mean, what is this really? What can it be used for? And is there something we have missed? I mean, because we haven't really made these laws to a actual practical living. They're like just an ideal, something that we wrote time ago and we felt like really good about it, like, oh my god, this sounds so good, yes, we write it down, but then like 60 years later everything is still really shitty and there is really no right to life to speak of. So yeah.
Exactly. So we're looking at the jure aspect of the laws instead of the facto, meaning how it is only on paper written. For everyone, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights sounds great, but when we look at the actual application thereof, what is the stance of the governments in relation to the application of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Is there any legal enforcement to it?
Yeah, I mean, when you read on, for example, Wikipedia, or when you read in study books about international law, they say that, for example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that should be when the country have become a member of the convention, they should be obliged to, you know, implement the country and so forth. But, you know, if the country does that, you know, as an individual, you don't really have any say. You can't go to your court and say, you know, my government didn't implement this law, so now, you know, go say to them that I should have my job. Like as an individual, you don't really matter. Well, they don't really have. Okay.
Well, the point here is that governments are seen as the one that should do everything at the moment. There is also like this idea that the government should be the one that only guarantees you. And when we talk about, for example, demanding the right to have money to live, we kind of leave it all to the government. And we had a question coming in that is precisely asking with regards to this point, which says, a right is something that you are born with. Government protects your rights. And if you want money, you have the right to go and earn it. Government will protect that right. To give you money, government had to take by force from someone else. So that is kind of a point that we would like to discuss in relation to, and this question is from Glenn Woods. So what would you say about this aspect and this question that he's posting?
Okay, from the perspective of you know, the human rights and for example, the right to life. I mean, the right to life, looking at the point in common sense, it applies a right to have an income. So then currently, I mean, yes, maybe for someone to have an income from the government must actually take it from someone else, for example, through taxation. But I mean, here there are other ways to structure our economic system so we don't have to steal from one another, but that we can instead cooperate and create, you know, an income that is for everyone. And that is then the living income guarantee that we propose in our group.
Yeah, it's also the idea. There's coming a question, but here first, I'd like to pose this suggestion, which is we have the idea that the government has to do everything for us, and we don't have to do anything with how the money is created and so forth. Which, if we investigate further, yes, even the way that money can be created can be changed and reformed. But at the moment, because that would imply bigger reforms, the solution of living income guaranteed has to be applied within the consideration of how the economy works at the moment, how government is running the economy at the moment. So, if we begin to investigate further on how the government operates and where does the money, where the money is coming from and so forth, we can find many flaws, and we can get to this essentially the position of being anti-government. Which we are not. We're precisely suggesting that this, as a human right, as a living guarantee, can be enforced by all the governments, and that it doesn't necessarily have to create this type of demanding and causing a lack, whether in governmental budget or else, because I invite you to read the Living Income Guaranteed proposal that is precisely structured to be able to generate sufficient money from various reforms, such as nationalization of resources, cutting back on all the extra ways of getting money, such as pensions and unemployment funds and so forth, and just install the Living Income Guaranteed proposal as a human right, as a citizen right. And from there, the money shouldn't be a problem in itself, because the money that goes hand in hand with the topic of this hangout. The right to life is kind of the right to money at the moment. So we have to guarantee ourselves that right to have access to money. And that will have to be done as a legal move, as a legal proposal that can be enforced politically, and that we can all simply participate by living in the system. So there's no lose-win situation. It is a win-win situation wherein the government will still be active as a management, an entire entity that will ensure that everyone gets the living income guaranteed. So we don't necessarily have to look at where is this government taking the money from and so forth. That it's not relevant at the moment. It is how we as citizens can implement this guarantee within the construct that our economy is running in at the moment. So Victor, please continue.
Yeah, so I don't really know where I was, but do you want me to continue expanding on?
Yes, precisely in relation to this international law, and how is it proposed, let's say, at a practical level? Because as you were explaining, everything is placed so nicely on words, but how does it actually go through in the application? What have you investigated about this?
Yeah, so apparently it's different for each country, but in Sweden, for example, we have something called a pluralistic system, which means that when Sweden enters into a treaty with an organization with countries, then this treaty can't be directly used by citizens in the country, but it must be implemented through a law by the parliament. So this is one of the problems then, because in Sweden we don't have any form of law that say that you have a right to an income, right to life. We don't have a law that said that you have a right to work. They only exist, on a level of conventions high up there, and you as an individual don't really have any power to be able to go to a court to challenge the government. So that's why at the moment it's like, it's a fantasy almost. We can say, yes, there are the human rights, but then when it comes to really, making them substantial, there is nothing happening.
Exactly. We have a question from Joku, and he's saying a perspective is that the governments cannot really enforce anything that the majority does not first agree on and thus demand, because otherwise the government becomes a tyrant, forcing people by policy. So here we need citizen political awareness. Is this correct?
I didn't really understand. Can you say it again?
Yes, it says a perspective. The governments cannot really enforce anything that the majority does not first agree on and thus demand, because otherwise the government becomes a tyrant, forcing people by policy. So here we need, or what we require, is citizen political awareness. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe that's the primary reason why I can't go to court and say, hey, give me my right to life, because we have no people in government that actually stand for such a point, and we as citizens are responsible for that because we have not placed anyone into that position with that awareness.
Exactly, and it also ties in with the question that we had coming through, because in essence, as we know, we tend to, as society, always see all the rights that we are entitled to, but we never say, what is my actual practical way to take it into application? What do I have to do as a citizen? And this is also why you can also watch our previous Google Hangout on politics, redefining politics, because we tend to only just leave this up to the government to decide essentially what's best for us, which, as we know and as we are discussing with Victor, it's never been applied and never been done. So what would you say, Victor, is the road to follow through? Because we have all of these nice rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the right to be born free and inequality, the right to have a dignified living condition, education, and so forth. But what would you say comes through with the proposal that we are placing here as a living income guaranteed, and this legal aspect, and what we as individuals would have to first kind of begin doing in order to take this into application?
Yeah, I would say that, the living income guarantee, that's the actual manifestation of the universal human rights. Because really, when looking at the very basic, it all comes down to money. And if you give everyone, a proper life, then the rights will simply come by themselves. I mean, because they all really just go down to money. The right to life, you need to have money. The right to a dignified life, you need to have money. The right to education, you need to have money. The right to work, have money to, start your business, and it's just about money. So this proposal, I mean, it's like, the statement of, okay, we have created these ideas, but I mean, let's now make them real. Let's look at what is actually required to be done, and that is to, place it into a economic and political structure that, actually works for everyone.
Exactly, and also in relation to how the legal system operates, How would you say this applies to in terms of looking at the economic aspect of how to make a law applicable in essence? A law that stops being just a written document and goes into application in terms of, for example, guaranteeing the right to life in this case. What is lacking in essence? What would be required to be done?
Do you mean like what would be required to done to make the law a reality? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay, well, so that would be then to, as you was earlier describing, you know, the income guarantee proposal to nationalize resources, to, you know, take the resources within a country and make sure that it's distributed in such a way that we can, you know, nourish a supportive and life-friendly society instead of what we have now as this, you know, organized chaos where everyone is competing and constantly being afraid of death and, you know, will I lose my job? What is going to happen to my children? How is my future going to be? You know, blah, blah, blah. So much shit that we could simply remove if we were to implement this living income guarantee.
We have a question that ties in with this point that we're discussing from Joku, and he's saying, having a person in a position within politics and government who stands and is willing to change the system is necessary. But for that person to succeed, they must be empowered by backing of citizen politicians. And this means all of us. There should be a part two to this. He's saying the way we thought it worked was that elected politicians are paid to work full-time to protect our rights. Because most people have to work a lot of hours just to make a living, thus don't have the time to look after things. This is a very interesting aspect because we see these problems, and mostly the people that are realizing all of the flaws because they're living in the flaws themselves do not have the time, do not have the money to propose or produce the solutions. So what would you say in relation to this aspect, Victor, when it comes to not having this kind of solutions being available to the majority of the people, probably not even knowing that this is a universal declaration of human rights? So what would you say is the solution or the way to go within this, and how it ties in with the living income proposal?
Yeah, because, you know, with a living income proposal, everyone will be guaranteed a minimum wage or a living income, which is like, you know, even if they don't have a job, they will be able to sustain themselves, to buy what they need, and create a life for themselves. So, I mean, that would remove what currently exists as this sort of, you know, the low-income people become depressed into this intellectual numbness where they only live from week to week and they don't really have the energy to care about anything else but themselves. So within, you know, implementing this proposal, it would really mean that people would be able to educate themselves and, you know, become more involved in the system. Yeah, politically aware, so to speak.
Yes, so Joku is also kind of filling in the points here as well. He's saying, so understanding we need citizen politicians to stand up, and should we focus on educating and motivating people first, rather than focusing on putting specific people into government positions, or should we do both at the same time? Which is a very interesting point in relation to how to take this living income guarantee proposal into action. Because we see, as you were explaining, there's this intellectual numbness at the same time, but there's also lack of education, there's also lack of resources. What would you say should be necessary to first educate the people, or mainly just focus at the moment on putting certain people in these political positions to, for example, bring through the living income guaranteed, or should we do both at the same time? What's your take?
Yeah, I think we could do both at the same time. And then also, for example, politicians, they get their mandate because of votes, and that's so voters must know what they're voting for. So in essence, they have to be a little educated, to understand that that guy, he's gonna do what I want to. So yeah, both at the same time, I would say.
We have to be, in essence, educated about our right to life and what that practically would imply to, which, as the title of this hangout is saying, it's the right to have money. But how can we get that right to have that money to cover all our fundamental human rights is what's required to understand. And that's why we invite you to read the Living Income Guarantee proposal, because here we disclose all the aspects that can be covered as a fundamental human right, as the way to genuinely place the Declaration of Human Rights into application as a legal and political move that can be economically placed into application. So, Victor, what's your perspective? Well, we have another question here. This one is from Adele, and she's saying the way we thought it worked was that elected politicians are paid to work full-time to protect our rights, because most people have to work a lot of hours just to make a living. This was the part that I read previously. Thus, don't have the time to look after things. So, in essence, what would you say about this?
The point of full-time politicians.
Yes, and that's interesting also, as like having only these guys that take the political positions, and how we have within that only kind of abdicated our responsibility to them. What's your perspective on this?
I would say that that's unfortunately how it is at the moment, but I mean, now with the internet, there's lots of new possibilities on how to direct this point. And I know, for example, that the Pirate Party has developed an idea called liquid democracy that enable its members to participate directly in developing the party's political program.
Exactly, that's also what we were looking at in terms of how we can use the technology, the means that we have at the moment to not only create a platform in which people can directly vote and participate and make decisions, and all of those votes also not being able to be corrupted because it is a system, it is a software. But also, as we were discussing earlier on, it would also be a matter of educating people about these fundamental human rights, what we are entitled to universally from the Charter proclaimed by the United Nations, and how through the Living Income Guaranteed can be essentially come into realization or application. What would you say is the current state of awareness of these human rights, Victor? What have you found out in terms of your personal experience or what you have researched?
Yeah, I mean, personally, from from the perspective of a legal student, it's very much that you're indoctrinated into thinking that these rights must be interpreted by a lawyer or a judge or a politician. So then the right to life means something very specific, like, okay, you can't be killed, for example, with death penalty. But what I see is that, we as citizens of this world, we also have the right to redefine what life is. And then in redefining life, I mean, that gives these rights a completely different outflow. Because what if you define life saying that, okay, it's not enough to just be alive. That's not living. It's not enough to just have access to some food now and then. That's not living either. I mean, you should have a house, you should have a car, you should have a partner. I mean, that are points that you should be entitled to, because that is what it means to me, live a fulfilling life.
Exactly. That also ties in with what we've called this struggling to make a living. You have to work to make a living, and seeing, for example, all of these ways to make money or get money to live as pejorative, in essence, seeing that as something you should be ashamed of if you're on welfare systems, unemployment benefits. All of these, what we've also researched through all of these Google Hangouts, is that people in society diminish or consider or deem the person to be less than or inferior if they are not working to get money to live. So we're looking at, once again, the educational aspect of how we are in society trained to believe that we have to work to make a living. But as we were also discussing in a previous hangout, that is not even viable at the moment when many jobs are being replaced by machines, for example, or when there is not enough people that are getting access to education to get such positions of having a job and making a living. So there is and must be and is required to actually implement a way to make ends meet, essentially to, first of all, level this point of support that can be given to everyone, because it is required if we want to get to a point of stability in our societies, to eradicate poverty, for example. And that would imply not only investing in education, but also investing in our ability to create these political platforms and political discussions to understand that it is not the job of only a few to make the decisions in this world. Yeah. So there's a comment from Adele, and she's saying, just a point, the cool thing about now is social media, where we interact with each other all over the world. So now the citizens do have the voice, where before it was only through TV and radio. Yes, that's also a very cool point, Adele. Thanks for sharing it with us, because what we're doing also with these Hangouts is precisely investigating from all over the world how our right to life are being discussed, how are people going through by living in welfare systems, how is the political system operating. So, Viktor, now that you're in Sweden, of course, what's your perspective in relation to a basic income, a living income guaranteed? What you've heard about it? Share with us.
Do you mean how, if it would be able to be implemented in Sweden, or?
Yes, if people are already discussing about it. I mean, what I know is that the Pirate Party was supporting it. So what have you heard? For example, if your family or people around you are aware of this as something that could be implemented as of yet or not?
There is definitely a growing movement in Sweden to implement, something that resembles the living income guarantee, which is the basic income guarantee. And there are, especially the environmental party in Sweden, at least before, they have pushed this point. But looking at it on a political level, with the big parties, there is still nothing coming through. So what would be required in order to actually make it a reality is to, build it from the grassroots, so to speak, and then take it into the political arena and do that through, one man, one vote, because that's how democracy works.
Exactly, I agree, and that's precisely also what we are proposing as an integral aspect of living income guaranteed. It won't come just as something that can be demanded, but something that has to be proposed along with all of the necessary reforms and adjustments that have to be made at an economic level to make a living income viable. There's another comment coming on from Joku, and he's saying, Victor, so we have redefining politics at the individual level, which is what we discussed also with him. We now also need redefining law. What would you say about this?
Yeah, I think so too, because I mean currently law is only for money, mostly money, and then some very basic rights are protected. But we could really use law because it's quite a force in society, you know. If the court says that this man is going to jail, then he will go to jail. But we could change that to say that man should have his living income guarantee, and you know make rule of law, because we don't really consider it, but in essence everything on a daily basis that goes on in our lives is there because of laws.
Exactly, and also if we look at all of the problems like criminality, that would also be prevented by the provision of a living income guarantee. I mean, it's only common sense that we in the current system, as we are accepting and allowing it and creating it, we are propitiating all of these events wherein people within that extreme need to have their basic fundamental human rights guaranteed have to resort to kill, to sell drugs, to commit crimes in order to get money, to theft, robbery, and then get into jails that are currently, as we know, profitable in this system. Yeah. So if we see this is just one aspect and one of the social problems that we tend to look at as, you know, there's bad people, mean people, but we don't trace it back to look at how we create criminality in such terms and how it could be solved just by deciding to guarantee each other's human rights life. So, Victor, we're running out of time right now. Thanks a lot for being here. Would you like to say any last words on this topic?
Yeah, well, I would say that at the moment, the international law doesn't give any substantial rights, but we can use it as a political push thing. I mean, to use it to push our points forward, to say that, I mean, this right, it states that we have the right to life. And this system that we propose, it gives that in a practical and realistic way.
And also that it can be applied at an international level, because this is not only something that can be applied in America or Europe or South America. No, as it said in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is universal. So this is also why the foundation of the living income guaranteed is fundamental human rights. And as such, we're saying it is perfectly able to be applied just by constitutionally agreeing to provide the right to life through providing money in the form of a living income. So thanks a lot, Victor, for participating with us, for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
And
thanks
so we'll see you guys in the... Yeah, cool. There was a laugh there. So guys, join us in the next Living Income Guaranteed. Next week we will have another topic, so stay tuned and be well. Enjoy your holidays. Bye.
Yeah, bye.